Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 844 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today I'll be speaking with Fletcher. He's an adult living with type 1 diabetes, and we have just a wonderful conversation that gets very philosophical at the end. I hope you enjoy it. I think you will. While you're listening today, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you happen to have type 1 diabetes like Fletcher, or you're the caregiver of someone with type 1 like me, can you please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and complete their survey? It will not take you long. It is completely HIPAA compliant. The questions aren't difficult. They're all about diabetes type 1, and it's anonymous. The questions they ask are simple. They're about your type 1 diabetes or your child's type 1, and your answers help to move type 1 diabetes research forward. You can do that right from your home, just sitting on your sofa. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. It really will just take you like 10 minutes, and it's going to help. I appreciate your time. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by US Med. Get your diabetes supplies the way we do from US Med. Getting started with US Med couldn't be easier. All you have to do is go to usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. The podcast is also sponsored today by AG1 from Athletic Greens. Now, I take AG1 every day. I put a scoop in with about 16 ounces of water. I shake it up, drink it down, starts my day off right. You could as well. athleticgreens.com/juicebox. Start your day off on the right foot. When you use my link, not only will you get your order of AG1, but you'll also get a free year's supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs of AG1. Links to all the sponsors at juiceboxpodcast.com. If you can't remember, athleticgreens.com/juicebox and usmed.com/juicebox.
No worries.
Thank you.
It's funny. I'm looking at your picture on Zoom, and it's exactly how I imagined you look.
Is it really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like almost spot on. Like the face structure, I don't know about, I didn't imagine you wearing glasses, but.
Well, so Fletcher, we're recording. I want to keep talking to you about this. Is that okay?
Oh, that's totally fine.
Right.
I had a feeling that we were recording. And by the way, I just want you to know, I had zero notification that this was still happening.
You didn't get an email? 24
well, I got
hours
one
ago.
like 3 days before.
Let me take a look at how you're supposed to get one 24 hours prior.
Oh yeah, that's totally fine. But I think we scheduled this
6 months ago.
6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I just thought I would have heard like maybe a month prior and said, hey, we're still on, just so you know, instead of
that's
24 hours before.
Well, I appreciate that. That's good to know. So I'll look at the system and see if the system gives me an opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, just, that gives you a little bit more time to prepare and make sure that nothing else needs to be scheduled that day, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I'm actually making a note for myself. Let me see if we can get like a 30-day countdown, maybe. All right, thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up. So, I know I don't have a camera. I apologize, but
okay.
If you how do you come to believe that you might know what I look like? That's fascinating. Like, what led you to that?
Well, when you listen to someone long enough, you just start to put pieces of the face puzzle together, right? And you think about body structure, you think about how they carry themselves,
It's interesting.
And sometimes you even compare them to people in your life. You kind of have that same tone of voice. So I don't know. So when I first saw your picture, I said, you know what? That's like spot on. That looks like a Scott Benner to me.
Do I look like a friend of yours or an acquaintance that you matched me to in your mind?
Probably the closest reference would be my cousin's husband,
Okay.
who lives in New York, and huge New Yorker. But yeah, that's about it. You don't. I mean, you kind of look like a New Yorker with the way your hat is, but
The hat was just new, so it didn't.
Was it?
Wasn't
Okay.
formed in my head yet. Yeah, that's
great.
interesting. It really is very interesting. I listened to a radio show for years, and one time then saw one of the people on the show, and I was so far off from what they looked like. I thought, like, well, obviously I'm not good at figuring out what people look like from how they sound. But it's nice to know that you were close. So I appreciate it. Well, so since we've already started, just introduce yourself very quickly.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Fletcher, and I've been a diabetic for 28 years now.
Okay. That's a good long
Today's
time.
actually my birthday.
Is it?
It is.
Fletcher, how old are you?
I'm 35.
Oh, happy birthday. I'm used to think it was when people would come on and say, today's my birthday, or, tomorrow's my birthday. For like the first handful of times, I thought, what a coincidence. And now I think I realize that when people have an opportunity to pick a date in the future, they might have off on their birthday, or they, you know what I mean? Like they might be drawn to their birthday or something like that, because it can't be coincidental at this point.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I would doubt it. I think they're picking it on purpose.
Yeah.
Do
Do this and I'll go to lunch.
Right. Well, and what better way to talk about yourself than on your birthday?
Really, really is a reasonable decision. Okay. So, all right. So today's your birthday. You just said, I'm sorry, you turned 35?
Yes.
35. You've had diabetes for
28 years.
28 years. You were 7 when you got type 1. Okay. 28 years ago, 94-ish, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Living at home, obviously, because you're young. Your parents together, divorced?
Yes, they're together.
Together,
Oh, yeah.
brothers, sisters?
Mm-hmm. 2 older brothers.
Okay, you're the youngest.
So I'm the baby.
Do either of your brothers or your parents have any autoimmune stuff?
No. My grandparents did, though.
How so?
They had some form of diabetes. I don't know if it was type 1 or if it was just type, the type 2 version. But I know that they did have complications from it. That's it.
You know about how old they were when they passed?
They were young. Well, my grandfather was young. He was early 60s. And then my grandmother was about 70.
Okay. 60s or
So,
okay. Yeah, I mean, today's standards, that's very young. I remember my grandmother passing when I was like 16, and she was 73, and people were marking at how long she had lived. And I was like, all right, well, I guess that's how old I'm trying to live to, 73.
they could have been saying that to make you feel better too, but totally understand. Yeah, we understand now that women are going to live way longer than us, but
So just an
that's neither here or there.
Yeah, like an evolving idea as the medical world
Right.
changes, right? I mean, diabetes is a great example of that. Just expectations and longevity ideas change like with technology sometimes. So,
Right.
Do you remember being diagnosed?
Oh yeah, like the back of my hand.
Why? What happened?
Well, it was just a weird series of events, right? So my mom took me to a normal doctor's appointment, and you're going to laugh at this. I hated needles with a passion. And every time we would go to the doctor, that would be the first question coming out of my mouth. And I would say, hey, am I getting stuck today? Like, I'm going to freak out if I'm getting stuck today. I'm going to walk out of this building. And, they had known that, the doctors and nurses, they all knew that. And so when they tested my blood sugar that day, the doctor came back in, and this was a great doctor. He was hilarious. He wore buttons on his jacket, like a ton of buttons,
Mm-hmm.
and just had the goofiest sayings. And he comes in, but though he comes in with a serious face, so instead of all happy and cheery, comes in with a serious face and says, Marilyn, which is my mother's name, you need to take Fletcher, go straight to Children's, do not stop for anyone. And it freaked her out.
Yeah, I would think so.
And so, of course, she had to call somebody to make arrangements because I believe at the time my middle brother was still in school and, my dad was still at work. So someone had to ensure that he got home. But yeah, so she had to make a phone call. And I just remember sitting in the car looking at her crying and very distraught. And I'm like, what is going on?
Right.
And that's when we get to the hospital. And I remember going like, what are we doing here? Right. And she, again, what was odd is that she didn't say a word to me, bro, like nothing.
Mm.
So I'm just like going through these weird motions, like what's about to happen.
Yeah, trying to figure it out at a young age because, I mean, there's no way she knows what to say, right? She's having her own reaction. She's trying to figure it out. It's interesting.
Right.
What's the first thing she did say to you? Or do you remember the doctor?
It was so long ago, it's hard to remember.
Do you remember the doctors telling you maybe?
No. I remember going into the hospital. They took me to a room. They get me on the bed. They say we have to draw blood. And the reason my mother took me to the doctor to begin with is because I would always used to sit on her lap for a long time.
Yeah.
And she just noticed how bony I had become, as I continued to sit on her lap. And she said, that doesn't seem right. You're like losing weight.
Interesting.
And, she, you go through the whole peeing a lot, drinking a lot thing. She figured, okay, maybe we should take you to see the doctor. So that's how we got to this point. Anyway, so they put me on the bed and they said, we have to draw blood. So I was super skinny. I was, for my age, I think I was at like 40 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And this was the moment I always truly remember was having the doctors try to draw blood for me. And at one point they had 3 needles in each arm and they couldn't get anything. And so I remember my father showing up. All right. He walks in. He takes one look at me where I'm like screaming and crying and flat out passes out. I mean, he just like, it was like one of the TV show pass outs where it just fall way backwards and just hits the ground. And so they had to call code 15, right? So like 15 doctors are rushing into my room to come help my dad.
I'm amazed you remember the code number.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And my mother, as I'm still crying and screaming, starts giggling and laughing. And she's like, look, Daddy passed out. Isn't that funny? Like trying to make me feel better. It's like, yeah, that's kind of funny, but I'm still in a lot of pain here, And so finally they were able to draw blood. I remember them giving me a couple crackers and some water afterwards. And then I remember them sitting me in the room. And then they tell me like, hey, this is what you are now. You're a diabetic. You're going to have to take insulin for the rest of your life. You're not going to be able to have the sugar and the sweets and all the things that you typically enjoy. And we have a nice cheeseburger here for you. But in order for you to eat the cheeseburger, you're going to have to take a shot of insulin.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? And again, keep in mind, my mother, she knows how terrified I am of needles. And so I was like, all right. So I said, okay, let's do this. And at first I locked myself in the bathroom
Mm-hmm.
and then they coaxed me out and they said, all right, we're going to put it in your arm. I was like, they were like, count to 5. I was like, okay, 1, I counted it really loud because it helped. And I counted really loud and I got to 3 and they're like, all right, we're done. I'm like, what? I didn't feel that. I'm like, yeah, you're done. And all of a sudden this rush of relief came over me, like, oh, well, I can handle that.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a big deal.
Your biggest concern is not your desire to not have a needle anymore. It's that your parents are not tough in a hard situation.
Exactly.
Your mom turtled up and your dad dove on the floor and stayed there.
Yeah. So, but that night I remember my mom laying with me with the bed, and because I cried the whole night, trying to process what was happening. Because I didn't anticipate it, right? And so I was there for about, I want to say 3 or 4 days. I think my A1C was 14.
Wow. I mean, from your description of your body, this was really advanced, I figured.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and supposedly that they think I should have been diagnosed sooner.
Mm.
Like I should have been diagnosed at 5, not 7.
Oh, wow. Well, were you undersized at that point as well? Did you grow a lot after you got insulin?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everything started to kick in.
It is fascinating. Did your mom have hindsight? Did she ever speak to you about it? Like, oh, looking back, I do see this, or no?
No. My parents were very busy.
Yeah.
Very busy working. Sometimes they had to work 2 jobs.
Okay.
We didn't come from the wealthiest of wealthy.
No, I understand. You walk back in the house and you scan the room. Everybody's upright. Their eyes look like they're pointing in the same direction. You're like, good, another day done.
Yeah. And with 3 kids, I understand why she had to work the way she worked, to provide for everybody. And same with my father, which I can't be mad at them for that. It's just the circumstance that was dealt.
No, I mean, you can't really be mad at people for anything about the way they are. I mean, their actions are different, but who they are, the situation they're in is, it's hard to be mad about anything like that.
Yeah.
So did the fear of needles dissipate from that one instance, or did it reoccur on you?
No, it was gone.
It stayed away.
As soon as I left the hospital, I was fine with it.
Wow.
I acclimated to it rather quickly, which is surprising, but I never complained about it.
Mm-hmm. Did it bother you even though you didn't complain?
Yeah. I mean, it did bother me, but eventually I just thought of it as a way to say to myself, like, I need this. This is what you need now. And hey, do it in front of your friends and make you look cool.
That's something that makes you different at the very least. And sometimes that's what you're looking for, Sometimes not. Some people don't want to look different and some people
I am the epitome of different. Okay. Which is, I've always appreciated because it gives you different perspectives and in a good way.
Yeah.
So now my childhood best friend just also happened to be diabetic as well.
Really?
Right. But he's been at it longer than I had. He was diagnosed when he was 2. And so it felt good to know, somebody had the same thing I had. Mm-hmm. Right. Because back in my heyday, and I apologize, I have terrible allergies. I live in the Midwest.
No, it's fine. If you need a second, take a second.
No, it's good. I might just take a sip of coffee.
You're fine.
Just,
I'm going to ask you before you tell me about the heyday before you were 7. I love that there was a heyday before you were 7. But how long after you're diagnosed do you think, oh my God, my friend has this too?
Yeah. I mean, and I didn't even really question what he was doing at the
Okay.
time. I would see him test his blood sugar. Um, but at that age, I'm just kind of like, whatever, let's go play. Like,
Yeah, right.
I didn't give it any thought. And then I realized, oh, he's been doing this a lot longer than I have. I should follow in his shoes. And boy, was that a mistake.
One of the first things I do every morning is take AG1 from Athletic Greens. You could do this as well. You could build a foundation for better health with AG1. Use my link, athleticgreens.com/juicebox to get started today. When you do, you'll also unlock an offer to receive a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. That's on top of your AG1. Come on. AG1 supports immunity, boosts energy, helps recovery, and promotes gut health. I take it because I'm afraid that my diet doesn't quite include all of the vitamins and nutrients that it should, and AG1 helps me to feel better every day. I tried a handful of other green drinks before coming to AG1. One of them, I won't mention the name, tasted like what I imagined feet would taste like if you made it into a drink. AG1, however, goes down nice and easy, and my palate is hard to get along with, so that really is saying something. AG1 from Athletic Greens contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anythings. Right now it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills or supplements to look out for your health. Of course, to make it easier, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do to get that offer is visit my link, athleticgreens.com/juicebox. Once again, athleticgreens.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com to AG1 and all the sponsors. Have you found that getting your diabetes supplies can be a pain in the butt? I have too. But not any longer, because now we're getting Arden's diabetes supplies from US Med. To get a free benefits check, just call 888-721-1514 or go to usmed.com/juicebox. US Med has served over 1 million diabetes customers since 1996, and they want you to know that they're offering you better service and better care than you're getting now. US Med always provides 90 days worth of supplies and fast and free shipping. They carry everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Freestyle Libre 2 and the Dexcom G6. Arden gets her Dexcoms and her Omnipods from US Med. US Med accepts Medicare nationwide and over 800 private insurers. US Med is the #1 distributor for Freestyle Libre systems, the #1 specialty distributor for Omnipod DASH, #1 fastest growing tandem distributor, the #1 rated distributor in Dexcom customer service satisfaction surveys, and they are proud of the white glove treatment that they offer their customers. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. And that 888 number is special just for Juicebox Podcast listeners. Now, if you decide to go to the website, it's super simple. Here's what it tells you when you get there. Getting started is easy. From the comfort of your own home or office, you can now join over 1 million satisfied customers who rely on our staff of courteous, knowledgeable, and trained US Med customer care representatives to keep you up to date with your medical and diabetic supplies delivered right to your door. Super simple benefits check. Name, phone number, email, zip code, and then just hit the button that says request a free benefits check. It's that easy. Let US Med take care of your supplies so you don't have to worry.
Boy, was that a mistake. There are good diabetics and there are bad diabetics. And, when you're young, easy to be a bad diabetic. Very easy. And what I mean by a bad diabetic is you know, they're eating oatmeal pies and zebra cakes, all the things that we should not be touching.
So he had diabetes for a long time prior to you. If you're 7 in, what do we say, 94, then he had type 1 going back to 89. And back then, and probably even when you were diagnosed, were you regular in MPH at that point or no?
Oh yeah, regular in MPH.
Right. So the call of the day is you shoot in the morning, you shoot at dinner, and that's what you do. And and you go ahead and eat, and we'll make adjustments maybe every once in a while when I see the doctor. So he doesn't have any perspective. Nobody back then had perspective the way we have right now about how insulin works, really, because it didn't work the same. Your objectives were different. The technology was different. I mean, even meters were, it's not like you could have reached into your pocket, grabbed a little meter and tested yourself whenever you wanted to, right? Like the meters were bigger and right. And so he's going along living his life the way he does, and then you mirror him.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because he was my best friend too. I mean, we always hung out together, and I didn't question what he was doing.
Yeah.
I know that I shouldn't have been eating sugar out of the ordinary meal times I'm supposed to, because they would give you, an amount of calories that you were allowed to have per day.
Okay.
But again,
and it was counted by calories.
So they would designate like, hey, you're only allowed to have 1,900 calories or 2,200 calories or whatever. The dietitian would set that up, right? Okay. And I hope I apologize if I misspeak about that, but at least that's kind of how I remembered it. Is they would give you a kind of a calorie goal to stick to. Mm-hmm. And so when we would hang out, I mean, we would snack, and there was a gas station right next to where we lived, so we would always take a quarter or a nickel and go up there and get sugar bubble gum or these tasty chocolate treats and just go about our day, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of put me in a bad habit going forward, because I wouldn't get my A1C in control, and my mom noticed it too. Because when I first came out of the hospital, I was doing great. I was like, yeah, I'm eating my vegetables, keep my A1C under control. I think I got it down to like 7.9. Mm-hmm. And then it all went to HE double hockey sticks from there.
You know what's interesting is we talk so much, just not around diabetes, but in general about people. We talk so much about what people should be doing instead of what they do. And then life seems to become about this fight, to put yourself where you're supposed to be. And I get it, right? If it's health or, personal safety or, the way you treat other people, like stuff like that. Like we're all not going to run around with a club in our hand and hit anybody we want and take their stuff, right? We're trying to get past that. But we're constantly in a situation as human beings. We're constantly in a situation where we're trying to take our reactions to things and change them to something else because we're trying to evolve. And the truth is that, if you would have gotten diabetes as a caveman, let's say, you would have continued to live your life the way you lived it. You would have died sooner than you may have if, you didn't get this thing, right? And you'd be part of the, my example always flies to like, part of the ant hill. You know what I mean? Like you'd be the ant that died 4 days before the other ants. And one of the ants will be a little puffier than the other one, and one would be thinner than the other one. One would be crazier than the other one. One would be more aggressive than the other one. And I don't know. It's an interesting battle that we always find ourselves in. And I'm not saying people shouldn't strive for better health or behaviors, that kind of thing. But it does occur to me that every time somebody comes on here, what they talk about is, I am a person, this is how I am. And then suddenly somebody told me to be different. And then we act like that's easy to do.
Right.
Oh
yeah. And, at the time, I didn't have any other role model. Right.
Yeah.
When you talk about being different, if you were diabetic, you were different, because I remember going to elementary school and all the kids would be like, why does he get to have snack in the middle of class? That's not fair. And, in my head, I'm like, well, I don't want to have snack in the middle of class. Right.
Right.
I didn't ask for that. I didn't ask for the parents to kindly bring sugar-free ice cream whenever we would have ice cream day, but they did, and I thank those parents, being considerate like that and looking out for me. And that kind of continued through school that way for a while. And then, and keep in mind, I always think back to it too, is eating the way I did was my choice. I didn't have to follow how my other diabetic friend was eating. I could have, gave neglect, but it's one of those things where at that age, you're just, peer pressure, and you didn't want to feel different at that point, right? You wanted to feel normal.
Also, at 7 or 8, 9 years old, whatever you are, then, somebody shows me green beans and a moon pie. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try the moon pie. That just kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I was not a big veggie fan back then either, so that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. But it's interesting though, isn't it, that it makes total sense that a decision is made that way, and yet when you think back on it, you think of it as a failure.
Yeah, failure or, just unfortunate circumstances. There's nothing I can change about it, right? I don't regret, that I didn't have him, because he was great. He helped me get through my childhood, right? And, but one thing that always kind of brought me back, there you go. My blood sugar's dropping. Good job, Scott.
Here's what I hear, Fletcher. I've made you relaxed and calm, and your blood sugar's falling.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And like I'm not low. I'm 73 and cruising. I hate this thing.
What's your alarm set
False
at?
alarm.
What's your alarm set at?
70.
Oh, so you might have dipped under it for a second at some point.
Yeah. But I'm cruising. I'm good. I lost train of thought. Oh, and so, I don't regret going through what I did with him, but one thing that always brought me back is my mom found an all diabetes camp, right? So the first camp I went to, I was actually 8, and it was called Camp to Come To. And
that's kind of an interesting name.
I know, right?
It's the camp. It's the camp to come to.
It's the camp to come to.
But if you say it quickly, it almost feels like it was named by an ancient Indian civilization
tribe.
It's ridiculous. But go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, so this was just a day camp though, and you would go during, I think it was 8 to 4 or something like that, and I remember everything about that camp. Right? It was amazing because I had all of these kids who were exactly like me, and we had a bond, and we grew that bond the more we went to this camp. So I ended up going back every year for the next 3 or 4 years. And then when I was old enough, which I think was 9 or 10, I then also went to the sleepaway camp.
Camp to sleep to.
What's that?
It was called Camp to Sleep Too.
No, yeah,
No?
that would have been clever.
I don't know why they didn't do it, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sleepaway Camp.
No, it was Camp Corliss.
Okay.
And, for all my diabetic friends who are listening to this, and I know they're going to listen to it, they're going to reminisce about it. And, when you say different, I mean, my first name, when people listen to this, they're going to know it's me, and they're going to message me and be like, you were on the Juicebox Podcast? Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Because when you're diabetic and your first name is unique like that, it's kind of hard not to miss, right? And so the sleepaway camps, that always brought me back and kind of zoned me in, and be like, oh, I need to take better care of myself. But then as soon as you leave, it was like, you're back in the real world and things are hard and things get all messed up and out of proportion, and you're not on an awesome routine anymore. And so I would fall back into these bad habits.
Okay.
And, that kind of carried me into my high school and college years. And, I still was struggling. I think from when I was first diagnosed to, when I was 26, 27, that whole time I did not have my A1C under control.
Diagnosed to 27.
Yeah.
Okay. So 20 years.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think it was when I was 20, right? Is where it started to catch up to me, because I was having issues with my eyes. Mm-hmm. And so I went to a specialist and they said, yeah, you've got retinopathy, a little bit of retinopathy going on. And so, if you think about it, when we're living the life, we don't feel any of the repercussions,
Yeah.
And this just comes, I hope I can curse. I don't know, is this the after hours version? I hope it is.
Don't worry. You're fine.
But okay. Yeah. So, you just don't realize that the shit that's going to hit you later in life. And for me, it was my eyes, which you would think like, oh, that's not a big deal. At least you're not losing limbs.
I don't know, Fletcher. I see that as a big deal, but go ahead. Yeah, I wouldn't think,
yeah,
no, just your eyes. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. You still have your arm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because your eyes can be repaired to an extent. I guess your limbs could too, but that's, I don't know. If I had to choose a path, I would say not to lose a limb.
Yeah.
And, my eye doctor was the one that really beat it into me about taking care of myself.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting, because you would think an endocrinologist would do it. They would be the ones to lay the hammer down and be like,
I mean, you were seeing an endocrinologist for 20 years and they never mentioned to you that your A1Cs looked wonky to them?
Oh, they did.
Okay.
They did. But
you didn't care? You didn't listen?
Yeah. Well, again, it was one of those things where
it felt like it wasn't really happening.
Yeah, exactly. And, it was that one moment where I was brought in, I would get the reality check. And as soon as I left, that was it. I'm back to my old self, back to my old routine, and that's just the path continue. Now, granted, could I have asked for better support? Sure. And I think that's the main thing, is like, you need to have support from the get-go.
Yeah.
People who will keep you honest, people who will make sure you're doing what you need to do and continue that routine. Because if you don't have that support system, just depending on yourself and trusting yourself to keep yourself honest, it's a lot harder.
Who do you think should have been that person for you?
Oh,
people?
I mean, for sure, it should have been my parents.
Okay.
It should have been my brothers, but I don't blame them, again, because I never spoke up, right? I didn't ask for it. And maybe I wasn't supposed to. I don't know. It's kind of a weird line, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like everybody just wanted to pretend like, oh, he was diagnosed with diabetes. We now know why he was so skinny. We know what we have to do now, but that's it. We're going to do the bare minimum, make sure he takes his shots and test his blood sugar and then move on.
Yeah.
Right. And that was it. And so as a repercussion, 10, 13, 20 years later, I'm having issues with my eyes now.
Yeah. And
so first time, I remember getting lasered for the first time. And, it's not like, it's not like LASIK surgery where you're getting your eyes corrected, right? Completely different. This is the stuff these are the lasers that are like, you're going to feel in the back of your head, right? When they hit you. And the first time I did it, it wasn't too bad, right? The doctor put this helmet on, and just straight into your, I mean, it was weird, right? It was weird at first, but, after the first time I was like, okay, well, I'm done. Right. And he goes, oh no. He's like, we're going to be doing this for a while. And I'm like, what? Mm. And so we did do it for years.
And Fletcher, to be clear, you put the helmet on.
No.
Right. Can you imagine in that situation the first time, if he put the helmet on, you're like, wait, this is so dangerous. He's wearing a helmet.
No, that's how they laser into you.
Oh, wait a minute. He wears the helmet?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Yeah. All right. I guess I need to understand better. So what's the helmet for?
The helmet is, it's like, it's hooked up to this machine. And, he just, I mean, I say helmet, it's not like a baseball helmet or, whatever. It's like it's essentially, it's like a,
just like an apparatus on his head that helps.
Yeah. It's like an apparatus on his head where he can put this like little, mechanism in front of his eye to stare down into mine. And then he has like a remote control to like aim and laser into where it needs to be lasered. That's
interesting, isn't it?
It's very fascinating. Yeah. But, the first few times around, he's like, look, the first few times that we do this, sometimes it's going to be a little irritated, but then as we progress, it might get a little worse. Right. And it did, because, I got to a point where after, I want to say 3 or 4 years, it was painful to be getting this done. Yeah. And
was it helping?
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. It was helping. Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember the last time I had to do it, my wife actually came with me, and I remember it was excruciatingly painful. He said to me that I had to use this powerful machine. It's going to be a lot worse than you've ever felt before. And so he just went at it. And imagine, like, it's not like the sound you hear. It's not like pew pew. It's like it's literally. I mean, that's what it. Yeah. It's like he's playing a video game in your eyeball. You know what I mean? Like he's because he's trying to reduce the overpressured blood vessels in there.
Yeah.
And I swear by the time he was done, I felt blind. Like everything was black. And I just remember him saying to my wife, look, he took that like a champ, a lot of people, when they go through that, they have to take breaks, right? Because it hurts so much when they're doing that. I mean, And like I said, the only way I can describe it is someone is literally poking your eyeball from behind, you know, and causing enough to where you get a huge migraine. And I brought her with me because I knew I wasn't going to be able to drive, and it's a good thing I did,
Right.
Because I was not going to be able to drive.
Yeah. By the way, most people, after being described as, hey, they took that like a champ, are not in the situation where they can take care of themselves.
No.
Yeah, that's never a statement that's made and then you go skipping off to lunch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No. No, but it was the last time though. And I had at that point started getting my act together, and my A1C was kind of hanging around between 7 and 8, which isn't bad, but it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tandem came out with this Control IQ, right? And so as that was coming out over the next few years, I thought, oh, I'm done with lasering, everything's gonna be good, right? So I go back, and he's like, all right, now we got to switch you to shots. And I'm like, excuse me?
Oh, now you're getting the needles.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, now we gotta do shots in your eyes now.
Fletcher, how long did this go on for in years?
I think I started when I was 23, so 12 years.
Wow. Jeez, were you married when you were 23?
No, I didn't get married until I was 26.
Okay. That's still pretty young, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not judging you, just I'm saying.
No, sure.
Yeah.
Well, so, and once we started on shots, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, I don't even know if I can take a shot to the eye. I'm like, that's stuff like where you're like in your 70s getting that kind of thing, right?
I mean, that's what you're hoping when you're 26.
Yeah.
Like, if I ever should need a shot in my eye, I hope it doesn't happen until I'm 70.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, God.
And so, so by this time I'm in my early 30s. So like 30, 31. And, so I was going in, Scott, almost every 5 weeks to do this. It was bad.
Fun little note on your calendar.
Yeah.
Did you have other issues stemming from diabetes, or were your eyes I was going to say the main focus, but for some reason I don't want to use an eye reference. But because also when you said it feels like they're poking you from the back of your eyeball, I got a sharp pain in my left eye, and I was like, I'm very, very easily manipulated.
Yeah.
But did you have other things going on too, or was this?
No,
that was just this.
That was the main thing. Yeah.
But it was enough to scare you, and you were like, okay, what were you all saying about my blood sugar again? Let me get that right.
Right.
So was your health also improving?
Oh, yeah. I mean, progressively since I had gotten out of school. So I finished my master's in 2013.
Yeah.
It was at that moment where I felt like I could finally focus on myself. You know what I mean? And so from that point on, all the way up until now, I can happily say like my A1C is below 6.5.
Oh, good for you.
And of course I have technology to thank for that. I mean, no doubt, like without Control IQ, I don't know where I would be still, right? I might still be getting shots. But the shots didn't stop until maybe I was 33. So a couple years ago. And, maybe it was longer. Maybe it was like 31, 32. I'm trying to think, because
it's such a long time.
I don't think I was getting shots when I had my kids.
Are your eyes at a point now where you don't notice that any of this ever happened?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything like floaters or, my peripherals are still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every time I go to the eye doctor, I have 20/20, so that's lucky. But like, as far as like the impact of what they did,
Yeah.
there's been nothing bad about it, right? Like what he did was amazing.
That's crazy. I mean, I was going to say the doctor sounds like he was really skilled.
Yeah. And, I keep in touch with him. I played at his daughter's quinceañera. I have a band and, he hired us to play his daughter's quinceañera. You know what a quinceañera is, right?
Well, it sounds like a party that a child has at a certain age. If your background
you would be correct.
Is, going to go Spanish, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Look at me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
his wife is Spanish, but
okay. And you play music?
What's that?
You play music?
Oh yeah. I have a master's degree in music performance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you use it? I'm so interested. Do you use your master's degree in your job?
Oh no, absolutely not.
Been having this conversation with my son as he's just graduated from college and looking up and seeing the vastness of the world. And it's the first time in his life he hasn't had, structure. Like, this is a thing I do. I know I'm Cole because Cole does this. You know what I mean? And we're watching him go through it. And he's like, I don't know. What am I going to do with this degree? And I'm like, there's no way to know, man. I was like, just get out there and you'll see how it shakes out. So you have a master's of, I guess, arts or fine arts or something like that. Yeah.
So I have a master's. Well, it just says master's in music, but it's essentially in fine arts. Yeah.
I see. And you were able to pay back the entire college loan from your eye doctor's gig. Is that right? Everything's fine.
Yeah. Well, so they actually, because at first the shots were quite, they were quite cheap based on the version he was giving me, the drug he was using.
Okay.
And then he had to switch me to Eylea, and apparently that was like 2,000 or something ridiculous a pop, like for each shot. And I had to get it in both eyes. And so, they have programs out there to help reduce the cost of those. And luckily I qualified at the time. So
you qualified as a person who can't come up with $4,000 every 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I think we all qualify like that, Fletcher.
Yeah. You're telling me.
Yeah.
But
what did that form look like? Are you living? Yes. You qualify. Yeah.
Are you trash picking? No.
No. That's interesting.
It wasn't that bad. I still had to pay a little bit, but just definitely not as much. And, but as far as any other adverse effects, there haven't been any.
Good.
It's been great, as far as I can tell. And, I haven't had any issues since. Every time I've gone back to so I used to see my eye doctor, it started every 3 months and then it went to weeks. And then now I'm cleared to see him every year, right? Like coming back in a year.
That's excellent.
Which is like a huge relief because, for me that it took a long time, longer than it should have. And I can only hope that, this new phase of being in control is going to help me
it's impacting
progress forward. And
hopefully it's impacting you in a positive way, unlike not seeing after your blood sugars was impacting you in a negative way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And, so I think that the moral of the story here, Scott, is you need to take care of yourself because the time is an illusion, right? And it's an illusion to a diabetic because we think time isn't against us, and it is, especially with how we take care of ourselves. And if we abuse that and we say, oh, I'm just going to hit this ignore button and pretend that I'm not diabetic for years, there's going to be consequences down the road, whether you want them to be or not. and you just don't know what they're going to be. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have had kidney failure. I could have had a slew of other things that could happen. And, not that I'm saying that I wanted to go through what I went through, because it was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm still grateful that, as I've progressed over the 28 years, that, with the use of technology and everybody who's helped me in my life, that, I've gotten to this point now where I'm like, yeah, and having kids kind of helped too.
It always does.
I remember my doctor drilling that in when my son was born. He was like, you better take care of yourself. He's like, don't do it for me. Don't do it for your wife. Do it for your kids. Do it for your son. They need you in in their life. And that was like, I'm like, okay, I got to change, right?
Yeah.
I got a lifestyle change. Something's got to change. So,
but isn't it interesting that prior to your complication, you didn't ever see your life as something that had to change because you would be not around for loved ones? It wasn't until something happened where you went, oh, geez, this is actually going on. And now I can take the rest of this seriously. It's so, isn't it interesting? Like, we could say all kinds of cliched things, like the minute you're born, you're dying. You know what I mean? Like, or at one point the Grand Canyon was a river. Like that kind of stuff. Like, so you see, there's everybody experiences deterioration, and
right.
And it in a perfect scenario, if you get lucky, which, having this podcast, you just think everybody has diabetes, so it's just like it doesn't work out for anybody. But it does actually. There are people who they get up in the morning and they die at the rate they're supposed to. Right at the perfect promised rate of, I'm going to drop dead when I'm 85, and they don't have huge problems as they go along, but for the most part, people have issues, and not everybody gets that kind of gift of watching a river gracefully turn into a hole in the ground. You know what I mean? Like it's some people have to see the flooding and the rushing water, and oh my God, did you guys notice that the river blah 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 over the last year, it happened so quickly? And so you get a health thing, and it moves you along, it takes you off of that promised pace. I'm making quotes around promise, but but you still, when you're done, you're like, oh, it's still a nice river. You know what I mean? Like it's okay. Like there's nothing to do. We don't have to do anything. It's hard to see the future when you're living in the present. I mean, you've mentioned it like 3 different ways. Like when you're living, you don't see what's happening. And as things change and change and change, they change so slowly. You don't have there's no onus to react to it, because you say things like, oh, my knee hurts, I'm getting older. Or, like that kind of thing. Like I've been saying that for 10 years, my knee hurts, I'm getting older. And then suddenly a month ago, some guy was digging into my knee while I was asleep on the Jackson juice, which, by the way, I don't judge Michael Jackson anymore because that was amazing. and so like, I'm asleep. I wake up and the guy says to me, hey, listen, 5-10 years, you're probably going to need a knee replacement. Yeah. Now, up until he said that, my entire consideration around my knee was, oh, my knee hurts sometimes, I'm getting older. And now all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, my river's trying to turn into a hole in the ground. You know what I mean? Like suddenly there's a finite end point to it, a timeline, and something has to happen before you believe it, because you're wired to believe you get the gift of a slow deterioration. And I've come to learn from talking to people, some people say, doctor scared me into it, I'm so grateful. And then some people say, the doctor tried to scare me into it, it ruined the next 20 years of my life. So there's even the doctors are in a bad position because they don't know who you are. They don't know what you need, right? Like as far as encouragement or a kick in the ass, they don't know which is which for you. And we're all just left to ride the ride, see how it goes. And hopefully you notice that your knee hurts and do something about it sooner than later. It really is.
Yeah. And again, I mean? and I think that's where the support system comes in, because if you can't notice it, someone else has got to, right? And it's one of those things where, you know, you go to sleep and you wake up and your blood sugar's 300 something.
Mm-hmm.
And you just go, oh, whatever, take insulin, move on. Right. But, you know, you can go to the doctor and they can try to figure out why your blood sugar when you're waking up is 300. And unless someone else cares for you when you're that age,
right,
you're not going to care, you know, because either you don't realize the seriousness of the matter, or there's this, you know, mental block that's saying, I want to be normal. You know, I don't want to hear it.
It's going to be okay.
I just want to live a normal life.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, unfortunately for me, I couldn't break out of that mental block.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought I had to have this, you know, I wanted to be free of having to worry about it, you know, because when you're 7 or even 2, I mean, having that responsibility of taking care of yourself, I mean, it teaches you a lot really quickly. And, you know, for me, it was to the point where, you know, I was just doing the motions. I wasn't caring about, okay, where's my blood sugar at this time right now? Yeah. Right. It was just, okay, did I take my shot? I think so. Moving on.
Right.
And that was it. And, you know, so having someone to keep you honest, having someone to, you know, have your back on those instances is crucial. And, you know, luckily for me, my wife is that person. And, you know, she has been keeping on me about that because, you know, quite frankly, she wants me to be alive too.
Yeah, right? She needs you to pay for stuff. I mean, it's not fun paying for kids by yourself, I wouldn't imagine. No. I think it just becomes obvious that if you have diabetes, as an example, you can still get a graceful decline. It just looks different, right? Like you have to, like you're talking about it now. Fletcher, I feel like you've had diabetes for so long. You don't want to insult anybody, but I feel like what you want to say is, listen, take care of yourself. Like spend 5 minutes before lunch, spend 10 minutes when you see a blood sugar higher. Don't ignore these things because the consequences are very real, and they're not really avoidable. If you don't take the right steps up front, you are going to end up in one of these situations. But you don't have to. You just have to shift. I always think of it as shifting the work, right? You can coast now, and then at the end, suffer and spend your time in doctor's offices every 5 weeks and etc. Where you can spread out all of that effort at the end over the journey, and not only make the journey healthier, but it makes your endpoint healthier. And so you lost a couple minutes here and there along the way, day to day. But having said that, that's intellectually talking about it. You still have to be. You still have to be a person who can do that and do it with comfort. And listen, I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I've talked to people who are going to start having bad health issues in their 40s, their 50s, and their 60s. And when they tell you the whole story, they wish they could go back and do it differently. But I always think to myself, if I put them in a time machine and sent them back and even told them what was going to happen, I wonder if they'd be able to do it differently. Or if sometimes it isn't just who you are and these are your cards and you got to play them. I don't know.
Right.
You know,
I don't know. I mean, that's a really huge philosophical question of, you know, would you change your past? And
could you even, or would you just get back there and find that, you know what, this apparently is who I am. And this is going to go the way it's going to go. I'm going to be the crazy ant that runs in a circle and dies 3 days before the other ants. I don't know why. Right. That's who I am. You know.
Well, and I think the biggest thing there is how do you do it? Yeah, right? Because how do you go about doing that? It can't just be like, oh, I'm going to mentally change how I think about this. No, there needs to be a plan in place, right? Mm-hmm. There needs to be that accountability. And, you know, nowadays with the way technology is, that accountability is on a machine, right? I didn't have that growing up.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was a lot harder but I think ultimately anybody can put themselves in that perspective even if they have to say, okay, every time I see a high blood sugar, that's 5 minutes of my life that I'm losing, right? Something to just tame yourself and say, I need to take care of this. This is not an okay situation, or if I'm struggling, who can I reach out to help me? Because there is help out there.
Yeah.
There are support groups out there,
right.
And, I know for myself, like I'm always happy to help any new person who's, recently diagnosed, or if they're struggling, just to talk to someone. I'm always happy to do that, because that's, we're kind of like the band of brothers, right? We understand, and we know how to, not every diabetic is going to be able to help another diabetic. Every situation is different, but as long as you're trying, I mean, that's what counts.
It certainly does. And I hear what you're saying about making something tangible so you can measure it.
Right.
Because otherwise it just feels like, I mean, I've probably said this a number of times, but my father was a smoker. I think he started smoking when he was 12. He told me that when he was a kid, they went in the back of his home to a field and they took cattails. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a,
yes.
Right. And they smoked them because they were like, we're going to smoke something. And then, and then it went from there. And cigarettes were very pure. My father's been dead a long time. We're probably talking 70 years ago or more. Right. And he's smoking these cigarettes, and he would, as an adult, be so proud. I went to the doctor says he can't even tell I'm a smoker. He can't even tell. He x-rayed my chest. He can't even tell. Healthy, blah, blah, blah. My dad died of congestive heart failure. That's from smoking. You know what I mean? But he needed, nothing ever happened that slapped him in the face and went, yo, man, you probably shouldn't smoke. So he just kept doing it. And every day where he didn't fall over, he took as reinforcement. Yeah, smoking's not going to hurt me the way it hurts other people. I'm the special person that gets to smoke till I'm 100. And wasn't the case. And, and diabetes falls in that same category. You're going along like, I have a higher A1C, but look at me, I'm fine. And you're not. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah. Who was it that, was it B.F. Skinner that did the, where he would shock the dogs if they went to the wrong, or they did the wrong command. I can't remember which psychologist did that, but we should talk the Dexcom and say, hey, if a diabetic sugar is at a high point and they don't do anything about it for a long time, we should be able to give them a little shock.
We're going to shock them. So at first, when you said B.F. Skinner, I thought you were talking about the principal from The Simpsons. And then I realized you were not. I was like,
I can see how you think that. That's funny.
Like, Fletcher apparently paid attention.
And not a lot of people are going to know that reference, by the way.
Yeah. No, I thought, Fletcher paid attention in college getting his fancy art degree.
That's right.
Well, you know what? Listen, you're joking, but at the same time, after living with it for this long, 28 years, I think you're saying, like, people need help and you should take it wherever you can get it. I mean, what we're really talking about today is just the nature of people, and that diabetes speeds up deterioration, and we're not meant to deal with it that way. Like, our brains are not meant to deal. I say all the time, like, if people were wired to worry, we'd all just be neurotic and run in circles and bump into things, because we'd be constantly like, oh God, this is happening. That's happening. My knee hurts. I must have knee cancer. You know what I mean? Like, people would be out of their minds. I think there's part of us that's wired to be like, okay, this happened, keep moving. This happened, keep moving. But when you get a serious situation, you change your focus. You see it happen. I use cancer as an example. And I'm thinking of a specific person I won't name, but going along living their life, and then all of a sudden, bang, you have a very serious cancer. It is very unlikely that we're going to make it go away. Like, now we're in this mode of trying to elongate your life, where people are having conversations like, let's see if we can keep this person alive so they can see their kid graduate, or like, so their daughter can have a baby, like that kind of thing. Like, in a real serious situation where the finite end of your life has drastically been shortened, you see those people very often undergo a complete change. A complete change. It's painful, and it's a reshaping of who they are, what they think the world is, what they think of timelines and lifespans. And then they find a way to live a meaningful life inside of this shorter span. And then some people just get depressed and put their head down, and, it overtakes them, and that's that. But I find it fascinating and inspiring when people can reshape themselves quickly enough to adapt to a significant change. And I think a little bit about diabetes is that, when I hear Jenny talk, I think this girl, she's speaking from a perspective of someone who looked at her reality and said, okay, fine, I'm in, I'll live inside of this reality. And she didn't fight the reality, because when you fight it, you're going to lose. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think some people can find a way to repackage themselves inside of the new existence they were given. And those people do terrific. I swear to you, after I have to be getting close to having interviewed 1,000 people. The one thing I'm certain of is that happy people on some weird level decide to be happy. Yeah. And I don't know another way to put that. People come on, they've had transplants, they've had cancer, they've got horrible side effects. How's your life? It's great. Everything's great. And it's not that they decided to be happy. It's a way of thinking about it. I really think of it more as they decided to reshape themselves so that they can exist and fit in the new reality they were given.
Right.
That's it.
And, one of those things, I meant to mention this. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the 4 tendencies.
The 4 tendencies?
Yes.
Go ahead.
This woman, Gretchen Rubin, created this podcast called The Happiness Project. It's great. Absolutely great. I loved it. My wife and I would listen to it all the time. And we took the 4 tendencies quiz, right, to see what tendency you go towards, which is, you're either an upholder, a rebel, a questioner, or an obliger. And I fell into the obliger category. Mm-hmm. And it was clear as day why I'm an obliger, because I tend to put everybody else's needs before my own.
Okay.
Right. And I've realized that looking back through all the years, it's exactly what I've done. Is I would put everything before my diabetes. Not intentionally, but that is just what I did, because I thought those things were more important than my own self at the time. Okay. Right? Where I was like, oh, you know what? Even though my blood sugar is high and I need to take a shot, I need to go do these 3 things, or I need to go do these chores, whatever the case may have been. I always put other things in front of my own. And it's hard to come to that realization that even today, I still do that. Right? Mm-hmm. Where I need to give myself insulin, but I really need to change my daughter's diaper, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And it's easy to do. It's
yeah.
And it's not, sometimes we're not built for, just putting ourselves and giving ourselves that 1 or 2 minutes that we need to fix ourselves before we can fix others or help others. And that saying has always been in my head, is help yourself before you can help others. Because if you can't help yourself first, eventually you're not going to be able to help others. And that's something I wish every diabetic would ingrain into their brain, because I can tell you you're going to be that much more successful going forward in life if you take that moment for yourself first and then have those moments afterwards.
Yeah.
Because you think, well, if I put this on pause or put this on hold or whatever it is, if I need to change my set, whatever, it's not a big deal. But if you say that over and over and over again, over an expanded period of time, it then becomes a big deal, right?
Yeah,
and you're contradicting yourself.
Yeah, you diminish its importance so much that it has an opportunity to overtake you. It's almost like you ignore an enemy, almost, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Right.
Like it's staring you at the face, and you just allowed it to stab you, even though you can't feel it, see it, or experience it.
Yeah, and if you just put a tiny bit of focus and attention on it, it sort of shines a light in the shadow and makes it go away.
Right.
Wow, a lot of metaphors in there. Okay, so I looked up the Happiness Project because I've heard about it before, and all I can tell you is if this person, Gretchen, was the first person to come up with this, about 40,000 hacks have tried to rip her off since then. So. And I'm speaking from a tiny bit of perspective about what it's like to start the first something and then watch 17 other people go, "Oh, good idea." Like, thanks. Right. Yeah. Can I just have this for 5 minutes? I did build it all by myself from nothing. No, you want to just jump on? Fine. The Happiness Lab. Fine. The Science of Happiness. Fine. Happiness Podcast. Fine. Love Happiness. And oh my God, you almost can't find her thing because of
so many others.
So many other people using her. Do you know, I was just about to say I don't want to make this about me, but I think people would laugh if I said that. So the instance of podcasts with the word Juicebox in it since mine became popular is insane. There's more than a dozen of them. And just they take like a different variation of spelling, or they separate the words in different places or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, some of those people just might have woken up one day and said, "Oh, I want to make a podcast. I'm going to call it the Juicebox Podcast." And they go to register it and they find out like, "Oh, damn guy already did it. Like I have to change the name." I get that. But it's no when words become popular in an ecosystem where searching is important, then people start like, "Oh, Happiness Lab," or "Happiness this," or "Happiness that." That's popular. I'll put the word happiness in my thing. So as you can see, I'm a tiny bit sensitive to the idea.
Hey, no one's going to steal your thunder, Scott.
No.
You have no reason to worry.
I got to wrestle it back from them, Fletcher, if they come for me. I'm like, no. But, well, listen.
Well, that's when you slap a lawsuit at them.
I don't think my thing's is valuable enough that I could sue somebody over it.
Well, I mean, after however many episodes, 570 something.
Oh, please. I'm close to 700 now.
Oh, you're close to 700 now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I got a lot to catch up on.
Dude, I'm rolling.
Yeah.
But seriously, you've talked about so many important ideas. It's interesting because generally speaking, I get a lot of female people as guests. When the men come on, they fall into these two distinct categories. They're either men's men who are usually parents and are freaked out and trying to figure things out, or were freaked out and trying to figure things out for their kids, or they're thoughtful guys. And you fall into the thoughtful guy category very easily. And it was interesting because I didn't know when you came on today. Like, I was like, I wonder how this is going to go. So I'm very pleased with how the conversation went. I hope you are as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I already came up with the title for this episode.
Go ahead.
Keep the eyes on the prize.
Do you know what I jotted down? Code 15.
Yeah, but that's very vague.
It is. I love how vague it is. I also love that it's not that it's connected. That if you listen to this listen, Fletcher, they're your parents, and I don't want to be harsh on them, right? But in a moment when your 7-year-old kid is being diagnosed, your mom froze and your dad tried to die. And
she's gonna listen to that and go, "Oh man, he was right."
And then from there, as you're making decisions that, I mean, we can see in hindsight are bad decisions, but you would have no way of knowing, at 7 years old, there's no one there to go, "Hey, I paid a little attention to this diabetes thing. That seems wrong. Like, don't do that. Or let's try this instead. Or, you know, whatever. Like, you were just floating through it. And, you know, I have a very soft place in my heart for that, because I mean, my friend Mike was diagnosed probably 4 or 5 years before you, and everyone treated it the same way as you described. Like, oh, he takes a shot in the morning, he takes a shot at night. We're never going to talk about this again. And now Mike is dead. And so, it would have been nice if someone would have stuck up for Mike or been an adult in a time when he needed adults. And, it just, I'm not going to listen. I'm not trying to shame Mike's parents, who, by the way, have both passed. So it'd be pretty impossible to do, but or yours. Like, your parents just did what occurred to them. I mean, I feel like that's what we've been talking about the whole time, right? Your parents did what occurred to them. They needed somebody to tell them. Fletcher's in a different situation now. His reality has changed, and like it or not, so is yours. But instead, everybody tries to act like nothing happened. Right. And if you can find a way to live with diabetes where it's minimized in the background a little bit, I think, God bless, I think that's terrific. But minimizing it and ignoring it are two completely different things, you know, and people ignore it. And you've just laid out what could happen. I'm telling you right now, pre-bolus, or I'm getting lasers in my eyes, I'll pre-bolus. You know what I mean? But it's easy for me to say, again, intellectually, because if you gave me diabetes today, would I pre-bolus? Like, I don't know. And here's how I can tell you that I don't know. My dentist gave me these little trays that he made molds of my teeth. It was expensive. And then he said, hey, Scott, once a day, I'd like you to squirt some of this gel into this tray, pop these trays on, wear them for 15 minutes. I think it's going to be a big deal for your overall health, for your gum health, for your teeth, for everything. Like, I see in the future something might happen. Let's get ahead of it here. I said, okay, that sounds amazing. I paid for the trays. He gave me the gel. Most days I look at the trays, I look at the gel, and I think, I got to put that gel in those trays and pop those in my mouth for 15 minutes. And then I don't do it. So am I going to pre-bolus if I get diabetes? Intellectually, I think I'm going to. After I hear your story, I definitely want to. And then there's execution, right? Because in this same moment, my daughter's about to leave for college. She has diabetes. I have a job. I am oddly connected to people I'll never meet. My son just graduated from college. He's a little rudderless. My wife is trying to do her job and work, and we're trying to retire before, like, we can't move. You know what I mean? Like, we're trying to set our kids up for the future. And I'm supposed to put these trays in my mouth too? Like, how the f am I supposed to do that, Fletcher? You know, like I don't have, it seems easy, but I don't have that kind of time, man. And yet, I of course I do. It's the only thing that's important. So I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Good luck.
No, I hear you. And
this is a bummer.
Right?
Fletcher, this turned into a bummer.
You know, and it's funny you mentioned dentistry, because, you know, it affects our teeth too, right?
Yeah.
And the health of our teeth, which is very important. And I know I'm going back and forth, but I just want to make a correction that I said I've had the BF Skinner reference, which is correct. I mentioned Pavlov, but I think I wanted to go with BF Skinner because he's the psychologist best known for his influence on behaviorism.
Okay. So you confused Pavlov's dog with behaviorism from Skinner.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, Fletcher. I have to delete this entire episode, and you've wasted my time. Fletcher, you came so close. I'm so sorry. Wah, wah. It's over now. Yeah. Well, trust me, everybody who knew that you didn't have that right is still listening, because they're so mad. They're like,
oh yeah, I'm sure they are.
He meant Pavlov's dog.
This dude has a master's degree, doesn't even know the difference between B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov.
Is there a school in Antarctica I don't know about where 3 people went? Stop it.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you before we wrap up a little bit here. I mean, you mentioned a really, like, the Happiness Project is a big podcast, right? Like, it makes mine look like I'm yelling out the window, and so but it helped you. Does this podcast have a similar help for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's one of those things where I treat it as like almost like a confidence booster, and like for me, it's always been easy to connect with people. Like when I've been listening to episodes, I've always wanted to reach out to people and be like, I know exactly what you're going through, or I totally know what you need to do with that, or,
Yeah.
you know, I can totally relate to your incident that you have, that just happened. Like, so for me, it's kind of like, it's kind of meditative. And when you're able to just listen to others' situations, however good or bad they may be, it always has you doing a self-reflection of your own situation.
Okay.
Right. And that's I think the power of your podcast is being able to give every diabetic listening to this or non-diabetic listening to this the ideology of what should be, what shouldn't be, and how we're all reacting to it. Hmm. And some people are going to connect instantly. Others are going to be confused. But that's good because at least it's sparking some kind of reaction.
Yeah.
And
it's keeping you in
for
it.
me, yeah. So for me, having this podcast, though it may not be the most positive or happy, it is still something that I value. And I value it to the nines. Because if I had this when I was younger, I'd be in a different spot.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me, honestly, because I have come to the complete conclusion that I am making something that is more than I anticipated, and that I'm not fully in control of how it impacts people. Like I know it impacts them well. Like your explanation doesn't surprise me, right? Mm-hmm. But it might surprise you to know that I am not purposefully creating that for you. Like there's, I see the big picture. I know about I know that I talk about diabetes management a way that people find relatable, and and that's amazing. And I used to just believe that was the podcast. Like it was just me saying, hey, understand how your insulin works. And I think that for many people who are newly diagnosed or, struggling, trying to start over again, whose kids have diabetes, I think this is the podcast generally serves as an instructional thing for them. And it wasn't until I started really talking to the adults who don't speak up much in the space. Like you're there. I know your guys are there, but you don't pop into Facebook to be like, hey, I've had diabetes for 28 years. What's up? Like it doesn't work like that. Like the only people who, generally speaking, have the motivation to speak in public about it are people who are so desperate that they need the help of other people. And there's this, I forget the numbers, but it's crazy now because the internet's so big. But 10, 15 years ago, I was told that such a small percentage of the population has the ability to speak online, like to put their words down and share them with somebody else. Like most people, and by a long shot, most people are not interested in doing that. And so when people do that around their health, my expectation always is that they are really in need if they're willing to push forward like that. And the people who come out and help them is an incredible kindness, because for the most part, those people they're not in that bad situation. Usually they're sort of in that situation where they're like, hey, look, 5 miles back, there's a hole in the road. You can't see it. I know where it's at. If you want, I'll come back, put a flag next to it. You can drive around it. And that's just incredibly kind. But kind of back to the creation of the podcast, as I started seeing it do that, I kept thinking, oh, I'm not doing that on purpose. Like I was doing the management thing on purpose. I'm doing the feeling part of it on purpose. I want people to think bigger picture. I want them to step back macro sometimes. Like all that I'm doing on purpose. But the part where it's what you described. Like, I hope people understand, like, that's just a happy accident at best. If I sat down and said, I want to make a podcast, it's going to make a person who's had diabetes for 25 years and been through all the things you've been through feel the way you described. I mean, how the hell would I do that? How would anyone do that? You know? So.
Right. Well, I think it's kind of manifested and evolved, right? The evolution of your podcast, you know, as you say, started in this one space where you wanted it to be. And as you accepted more people who wanted to speak about diabetes and their situations and share their knowledge, it just kind of evolved into, I think, a huge platform for people to get a taste of what we have to go through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry.
The good thing is that it ultimately helps more than it does harm, right? You know, and I think people in my situation, because like I said, I've been going to camp ever since, I think last year I was at camp. I was like 21 or 22.
Okay.
So I have a lot of diabetes friends, you know, who we've kept up with each other over the years, you know, and as we get older in age, we start to discuss like all the things that are happening, you know, some of my friends who are going through pregnancies and what they have to go through. And, you know, which is great because you talk about that, you know, you bring people on who are willing to share those experiences.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people aren't willing because they're afraid of how they're going to be judged.
I think that there are things that don't get spoken about that should, and you're right. When sometimes you speak about them, people worry like, "Oh, what are they going to say?" I also think, as this is going to sound ironic to some people, because I believe that my sarcasm sometimes gets misconstrued, which is fine. But as odd as this is going to sound to somebody, the podcast isn't about me. I created a platform that reaches a lot of people, and I basically turned it into a megaphone that I hold in front of somebody's face every day. So right. I have the megaphone, you have the story, right? And because right. I don't have your story, I record almost every day at this point, and I don't have anyone's stories. I didn't set this thing up as a glorified audio blog where the same 15 people that you see online talking about diabetes just regurgitate their stories over and over again. Like I've very purposely, I like a lot of those people greatly. And, but still, like, I don't know how many times you're going to come on and say the same thing. And I see other places do it. I see blogs do it. Same article, like every 30 days. It's like they just write the same crap over and over again. I'm like, this stuff didn't help anybody last month. It ain't going to help them this month, you know, but it's clicks and it's a business and they do it. And I don't begrudge them it. And other people who have podcasts who are really just trying to drive listeners to their business. I mean, that's a viable thing to do. And people do it all the time. I'm thinking of 3 of them off the top of my head that are not really podcasts. They're just meant to hook you in enough that you go pay for their service.
Right.
And there are some people who just took the old diabetes blog platform and turned it into words, and, you know, that you can hear. And again, I don't know what that does to tell the same 10 stories over and over again. So, for me, I want to go find Fletcher, who lives in the Midwest somewhere and nobody knows except for his friends and his family, and let him tell his whole story, because your story is everyone's story to somebody. And we just keep doing that. There's no end to it. It should go on forever. And if I'm mindful, then I should keep getting better at holding the megaphone and asking the right questions so that people who are not accustomed to being recorded or telling their stories can get their stories out better. I recorded one yesterday, Fletcher. I couldn't slow the person down. They were shot out of a cannon. I kept putting up roadblocks. They kept driving over the roadblocks. And I'm about 25 minutes into it, and I'm thinking, like, I'm never going to put this episode out. Like she's just talking, you know? And then it hit me. It's gonna be exactly what somebody needs. And so if the rest of you don't listen through that one, I don't care.
It's okay.
Right. Like it can't be for everybody all the time. Like this person's story and the way they expressed it, someone's going to hear her and go, oh my God, I feel exactly the same way. And if I was saying this is what I would sound like it. And so, you know, a good example is so you have to put content out sometimes that everybody's not going to love. And a really good example is I put an episode out about Afrezza recently. Mm-hmm. It is not performing up to my standards, you know, compared to other episodes. It's not a huge drop off, but I could have very easily done something else on that day that would have driven, you know, thousands more clicks. And I just thought, no, this is important to somebody. Let's do it. I mean, I can't do them, you know, if I made the whole, like, I get a lot of stuff online. Afrezza people as examples are really like, you have to tell people about Afrezza. And I'm like, if I keep telling people about Afrezza, I'm not going to have a podcast because believe it or not that many people care about Afrezza. And I can't just make them care about it. I can wait until I see it tip and then find more people and hold up more megaphones. Like I can do that. But I can't force you to care about inhaled insulin. So it's just, I don't know, man. Like and again, I don't think you have to be, subjective to these opinions that may or may not have interest for many people listening. But if it's something where, like you said, you're using this megaphone, you're using this as a platform for people to get up and speak, you know, and it may, and to be honest, I think you've gained enough respect at this point that people may not care what the topic is. They just want to hear the podcast,
how you present it, and be supportive of you. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I think people will happily do that because of the big picture that you've started.
I'll tell you,
podcast.
I appreciate that. I'll tell you one thing I did do on purpose. And so you've seen a couple of recently episodes called Type 2 Stories, and there's going to be more of them if people with Type 2 will reach out and come do this. It's harder to get them to find. It's harder to find them, like, to do it. But I've been peppering Type 2 into the podcast for years. And every time I do it, I get a nasty gram from somebody. And most recently, I put up my first Type 2 story, and it's purposefully set up the way it is because the person has Type 2, but she's the parent of a Type 1. I was like, here's my hook. Like, I'll trick you into listening to a Type 2, right? And I got a letter, a typed note. Some people call them emails, Fletcher. And it said, stop putting Type 2s on your podcast. This is about Type 1 diabetes. And I thought, ooh, you're going to be really disappointed because I'm not going to do that.
Because a diabetic's a diabetic. I mean, you know, there's a difference between being between a dead pancreas and a pancreas that resists. But all in all, it's the same battle. You know, it's the same fight, right? And who are we to discriminate against someone who's also feeling a low blood sugar or feeling a high blood sugar?
How about it's a podcast about people? And my son and I were talking last night, and I said during the course of the conversation, I don't think of it as a diabetes podcast. And he kind of laughed at me. He's like, you have a diabetes podcast. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think of it that way. And he's like, he didn't understand. And I was like, it's a podcast where people come on and talk about their lives. And often we talk about diabetes, like, but not for the whole, like, I'm like, how do you imagine this? And I looked at him, I was like, have you ever listened to it? He goes, I've never heard your podcast. I was like, okay, so that's fair. I was like, but you're not talking about diabetes for 60 straight minutes. I mean, honestly, you could take the word diabetes out of this podcast and insert something else, and you'd be talking about someone else's struggle. It's you know, to me, it's a conversation. Like, I don't want to like like sound like crunchy, but like we're sitting around a campfire, it's digital and people are telling their stories.
Yeah. So. Like if I could be drinking from a mimosa right now, I would be.
Hey,
but
I don't drink, or I would let people drink during the podcast. I don't care.
Right.
Yeah. I totally want to interview somebody who's high, like while they're like smoking. That I think would be fun.
That would be quite entertaining.
I got to tell you, Fletcher, now that I said that out loud, I bet you that's going to happen. So it isn't going to take much for people to go like, I've been waiting for this moment. I think
hey,
good.
You know, there's nothing wrong with adding a little flavor, right?
No,
a little spice.
Not at all. I think back often to the drinking episode. Like my first after dark was about drinking. And I kind of put it out into the world, and I was like, I need like, I forget how I said it. I was like, I'm looking for a real professional drunk who has type 1 diabetes. And the woman who contacted me, I swear this story needs to be told every 6 months so it doesn't get lost. The woman who contacted me sent me a note and said, I'm supposed to be on your podcast. Apparently you put out a call for a professional drunk who has diabetes. And my husband and my best friend told me I need to come on the show. So you understand that when I heard that, what I heard was there's a person with diabetes whose husband listens to the podcast, away from her. It's not just with her.
Yeah.
And her friend listens to it. I was like,
right,
this thing is working. Like that was the first thing I thought. I thought, oh my gosh, like this is working. Like it's not just the girl with diabetes who knows the podcast. But how funny is it that they both came to her independently and said, hey, Scott wants you on the podcast. She at first was like, me? How does he know me? And then they gave her the description. She goes, oh. And she said to me something like, yeah, well, that's me. So here I am. And I was like, cool. Well, she came on.
You're becoming the Steve Harvey of podcasting.
I don't understand the reference. What does Steve Harvey do? I mean, I know he's the guy I laugh at on Family Feud, but how does the reference?
Well, I was going to say Oprah, but that seems, I don't know, a little much. I wouldn't call you Oprah.
Don't want to give me listen. I no disrespect to Oprah, but I ain't looking to be Oprah.
Right.
I sometimes.
So I'd rather go the Steve Harvey route because he's a popular guy and everybody likes him. That's where I was going.
I'm always fascinated by Oprah on social media, where she's like, I'm having a couple of my friends over. she turns the camera around. She's at a castle,
Oh my gosh.
There's 1,000 people walking up to it. I don't recognize one of the cars. When you see even on the road, you see a Mercedes, you go, I didn't know they made a Mercedes like that.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
That's
understand. Funny. I don't understand why she does that.
I
don't understand why there's no kind of decorum about that. Like, hey, I'm insanely wealthy. Why don't I not rub it in people's faces? But I guess some people like that though. There are YouTubers that make money telling you about how much money they make. That freaks me out. Why would anyone listen to that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
People are desperate.
Oh my goodness. All right, Fletcher, we could go on forever, obviously, but we're going to stop. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yes, thank you.
Sincerely. And that's pretty much it. I hope we covered what you wanted to talk about.
No, yeah, we did. And it was a pleasure. And, I'll definitely keep listening and you keep doing you, sir.
I'll do my best. Hold on one second. First, I want to thank Fletcher for coming on the show. And then I'd like to thank Athletic Greens for making AG1 and for supporting the podcast. athleticgreens.com/juicebox. Get your free 1-year supply of vitamin D, your 5 free travel packs, and your AG1 with your first order. And don't forget that you can get your diabetes supplies from US Med by going to usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. US Med always provides 90 days worth of supplies and fast and free shipping. All right, that's about it for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.